Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday afternoon here on Kobold Press. I'm your littlest red dot, and it's just me today. Surprise, surprise. My guest, unfortunately, could not make it at the last minute, so I thought, well, what are we going to do? I'm left all by myself, and I thought, wait a second. We're covering Women's History Month, and I'm a woman, and I work for Kobold Press. So I thought I would be the surprise guest. Yes, exactly. And open up the floor for you to interview me. What a novelty idea. So I thought we'd spend the next little bit just kind of chatting. Worst case scenario, I'll put myself under the same pressure that I put all of our guests under and ask them the same questions that I have been asking the ladies that have been coming on. But, I'm open to your questions as well. We're going to call it an hour where I spill the beans. I'm going to spill beans all over your questions. So stick around and I don't know, get your questions ready. I think it's an important month, Women's History Month. I said this last week. But it's important because I think it reminds women that they have power, and not that their power is better, worse, or negates anybody else's power, but in a society where for so long women have not been treated as equal and have dealt with an excessive amount of what we'll call the glass ceiling, not just in the workplace either, but in the homestead, in the creative fields, and it's a reminder month that we're here and we're awesome and we're super badass, and it's kind of awesome. So, I'm gonna open up the table. Beans, says Lysander. Yes, beans. You say you're sitting in the back of a little tiny brewery in a coastal hamlet. The strangers gather to hear the news arriving from the land far away. A hush permeates the room as a hooded figure approaches the bar and assigns a taker to each. It sounds like a really nice vacation. Speaking of vacations, y'all, let me just tell you, time to spill some beans. It's time. We've got a big celebration coming up. I want to get to the vacation part here in a second. We've got a big celebration coming up here on Kobold Press. We're turning 16! Woohoo! Oh, wait, do I have my kazoo around? I guess I don't. I think it's in the living room. Don't ask why I have a kazoo in my living room. There's some questions I cannot answer. Thank you for your 2-month subscription and enjoy all your little kobold emotes. Celebration 16. We're turning 16. And we're doing a 16-hour stream on March 20th to celebrate. I'm actually going to be hosting that stream from Mom Dot's house because it's the day after I get back from the D3 at Sea cruise. For those of you that don't know, there is a travel agency that has put together a D&D cruise with some pretty awesome celebrity DMs, and I am humbled to say that I'm going to be among them. So I leave on Sunday for a 7-day, 6-night, I think that's right, 7-day, 6-night, or maybe it's 5-night, 6-day. I can't remember. I'm leaving for a week-long D&D cruise where I'm going to get to DM some tables for people in person. Can you believe that? Another crazy novelty idea. And I've decided I'm running all Kobold Press. I'm very excited. I've actually got an adventure that I've been working on for the Warlock, so I'm going to play test it in person. And yes, KP, who you've seen on the channel, will be joining the cruise. Yes, you're right. KP's going to be our onboard photographer. So, if you're unable to join, I have no doubt that the pictures will be absolutely stunning. It'll be like you're there in person. But I believe that they've announced for anybody that, this wasn't a good time for them, or there were still, a lot of scare and hesitancy. I believe they're running another cruise in November, and a few of the kobolds are going to be on it. I'll be on that one again in November, and I believe Alexander actually is going to be joining with Amanda Hammond, at least for this cruise, and hopefully for the fall as well. So yeah, there's one in November, so go check out D3 at Sea. and come hang out. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm running Kobold stuff. I'm gonna run this pirate adventure set in the Middle Sea that I've been writing, and play test it and see how it goes. And then I have a setting that I have worked on for a very long time. I call it a setting. It can really be put into any world, but really, if I was to ever publish it, I'd want to do it as a setting book because it's that dense. And then within the setting book, there's like a campaign. But I have worked on this since I started streaming on Twitch. It was one of the very first things I play tested, and I just like dipped my foot in for a kind of weekly swing by game, and it was very fun. And now I'm putting some of the actual campaign into play with some of these people on this cruise. So join us for the cruise, and you kind of get first row seats to some of the stuff I'm working on. And you get to choose the table and the GM you want to be with, which is very cool. I know Mark Mears joining us. Critical Bard is going to be on board. So there's a lot of really great names attached to it, and some great chance to play with some people. So go check it out, D3C. So anyways, I'm going on this cruise, and then as soon as I get back, I get to celebrate the Kobold Press 16th birthday. So all of that to be said, make sure you mark your calendars for the 20th, because we're going to be, there'll be some like live actual plays in the morning and evening. We're kind of capping it, and then everything in between is kind of like a collection of some of our best stuff, which is going to be really, really neat. And next week, while I'm out for Kobold Chats, we're going to have a very, kind of special run for Kobold Chats. It'll be a little bit longer, but we're going to be running the 3 live panels that we did at PAX U 2021. So you can drop by. They're roughly an hour each, and that is World Building 101, Freelance for TTRPG, and oh yes, TikTok and Instagram for TTRPG. So they were all really great panels, and if you weren't at PAX, now you get to see them. So swing by Kobold Chats next week. You won't see my face, but you will see a rebroadcast of like all 3 of the PAX table talks, which is pretty cool. And there were some really great questions asked. So really worth the swing by, I would say. Oh, God's Mark Meir. I don't know if my little nerd heart could handle being at the same table with Commander Shepard. You could do it. Let me tell you, Mark is a friend and a really great human being. He's so humble, he's so wonderful, and just immensely talented, creatively speaking. So I only have positive things to say. If you can swallow the star-studded power that he holds alone, it's well worth just getting a chance to talk to him, because he's actually a really cool guy. Really cool guy. And you can hear Mark and I perform together. I when I'm not working for Kobold Press, one of the things that I do is produce a lot of other streams and or podcasts, and I. Back in 2020, the lost year, one of the things I forced myself to do in a state of quarantine and depression was to, in fact, start a podcast. And Mark Meir was part of that cruise. So, yeah, he and I do a Vampire the Masquerade podcast together that has, I don't know, people seem to really enjoy it. It's a bit dark and edgy, as you might imagine, and definitely not for the faint of heart, but I could not have asked for a better cast, and Mark plays just an absolutely wonderful character. Y'all got other questions, chat? Because if not, oh no, my phone's ringing. Because if not, I'm going to, my apologies. It's usually on silent, but they were coming by to pest spray today, so I had to have it on this morning. Yeah. I guess I have to ask some of these questions that I was forcing other people to answer. Like where I got started in TTRPG. I feel like when I first came on Kobold Press, I did a stream kind of like this, but... Oh, okay, good questions. Pretty close to what I was going to ask myself. What sparked your interest in TTRPGs? How old were you, and when did the obsession begin? Yeah. When did I turn to the dark side? So... I came from a really small town, and so the opportunities were not always there, I guess you could say. And so I started my storytelling, as most children do in small towns, which was with the church, with the church that my family attended. Because, there were always, like, nativity scenes and Easter pageants and choral stuff. And so I kind of got my start there, and then... it wasn't until much later that I found theater, which still in a small town was limited, to say the least. But it wasn't until college till I found tabletop games. I had never really heard of Dungeons and Dragons. That wasn't really something that I couldn't even get my hands on comic books where I grew up. Not really. I remember the place where my father got his haircut, the barber in town. He had a couple of comic books on his magazine stand, and when I'd go with my dad, he'd give me 10 cents for the bubblegum machine, and I could sit and thumb through his comics. But it wasn't until college, and I was in a theater program, and my fight choreography teacher noticed that I had a lot of love of Sword and Steel, which is a story for another day. Or maybe those are beans I'll spill today. Who knows? But he was like, hey, I've got a couple other kids. We meet in the park on Sunday. There was this beautiful park in Savannah. And I lived right there on the park. And he's like, we meet up. We train in different weapons. No firearms or anything like that. Just like bullwhip or quarterstaff or whatever he has. Self-defense sometimes. And we just hang out. And then afterwards, we sit around in the park and we play some Dungeons and Dragons. I think you'd really like it. And I was like, oh no, I was trying to like get out of college sooner rather than later, and I was booking all these gigs at Shakespeare houses in the summers, and I just wasn't sure. And I showed up for one. We played 3-5 at the time, and he was running our campaign into a story arc or like world that he had built for the last 15 years as a GM. And I was so honored, and we had such a good time, and I remember it just being so impactful. And then when I graduated college and I moved to Atlanta, I had nobody to play D&D with. And I think this is where the obsession started, because I wanted to play more, but as all of us know, somebody has to be the GM. And usually the person that wants to play the most takes up the mantle of GM so that they can go out and convert other people to the dark side to come play with us. And that's kind of what happened. I moved here, was working for a theater, and I was in retail management and some other stuff before I went to grad school. And one of the other actors in my internship program when I first moved here, I found out also played D&D, and that was all it took, was to find one other person. And then we managed to wrangle a table of 3 players and myself. And after that, it was like a downward spiral. We played a lot of 3-5 for a while. For funsies, we went back to 2 to just like expand our horizons. I played some 4, but I did it with like a different table full of people. And then 5 dropped, and I was invited to an Encounter roleplay stream for their community game. And after that, I was hooked. I was like, wait a second. I don't have to play with people in person. I could just play with anybody online that happens to have the same schedule as me. And it kind of started an obsession. And I started playing a lot more tabletop games. We didn't really have a lot of board games, or that wasn't something that my household did. My father traveled with his job and was in the military. So we didn't have like family board game nights, but he did teach me chess. And on the occasion, if my brother and I could stand each other long enough, we'd like make it through a game of Life or Monopoly. But I never really thought about games because I grew up in a video game culture. It was huge when I was growing up. And so I played a lot of video games. And when I first went to art school, my plan was to do video game design, which is so funny, kind of now in full circle. And then I got wrapped back into storytelling. And I think that's what keeps me in tabletop, is it's the best of both worlds for me. It's gaming and it's storytelling. So, I don't know, somewhere around 2015 or 16, I got invited to Twitch to play online, and it kind of just spiraled from there. Like, I had started a cosplay Twitch channel, actually. Like, when I started Little Red Dot, it was to build cosplays, because I was doing a lot of cosplay at the time. And then crazy things happened. I couldn't get enough of it, to the point where like I didn't feel like I was getting enough people to invite me. And I had all of these years worth of producing an experience producing shows, right? Usually for live audiences, whether that was for radio or for theater or whatever I was working for at the time. And so had all of this background knowledge of like live production. And then somebody showed me the great world of streaming, and it just kind of all like fell into place in this weird way. I took all this knowledge I had that wasn't really working for me in the real world, and then applied it to something else that I loved. And it all just kind of fell together in this weird way. It's why I love being a DM. I get to indulge that game development side of me while also being able to weave a good story. Yeah, absolutely. That's how I feel about it. It's so wonderful. And I've been lucky enough to not always have to be the forever GM. It took some time. Trust me, when I first started, if I wanted to play, I had to GM. But eventually, I got to the point where people also just wanted me to play with them, and that's pretty cool too. Really, I think the really first opportunity I got to like play. Like long term was for Roll For It, when they invited me over to start in their World of Darkness stuff. We did Just Around the Corner, which was a change, kind of an offshoot of Changeling the Dreaming, and after that I was like, whoa, heavy storytelling, beautiful storytelling, dark setting, and we had like a really extended campaign, and then of course Unmade Gaming was fast behind that. So, but now I'm a forever GM for Unmade Gaming because I started Coriolis and I can't get enough of it. So you've been the forever DM. It's hard to break away from forever DMing. I actually find it's not hard. Some people say that if you're a forever GM, it's hard to go back to being a player. I don't ever find that. Like, I actually find that I can like shed the skin of GM very, very well, and only ask people if they need like rules help or something when those things come along. I'm usually pretty good about it because I spent so long actually. If you think about live production, not in the director's seat, right? Like releasing that power anyway. So I know what that's all about, but. Oh, great question. If no one has a question, yeah, by all means, submit all the questions you want. We're just here to chat today. Submit a Sword and Steel. Have you ever dealt into HEMA or any other martial arts? Actually, my brother is a jiu-jitsu fighter. He does like professional jiu-jitsu, which is kind of crazy to say out loud. It's kind of crazy. But I myself, I did some kickboxing for a while, but I've never taken proper martial arts. I have some self-defense, but actually most of my training is in production side of combat. So we're dealing with like safety on sets with firearms. So I have a lot of hours with firearms and firearms safety specifically. And then a lot of time with like, when you look at stage, most of the time the weapons being used on stage are some kind of version of sword and steel. So I have a lot of training with like rapier and dagger, broadsword. I have a little bit of like what they call cali sticks and quarterstaff, but most of my time was spent, because I did so much classical theater, was spent with a sword of some kind. I did try bullwhip for a while. Not, I really, I really respect anybody that can crack a bullwhip. That is not an easy task. And let me tell you, you mess up with a sword, there are two options. Especially if you're in stage combat. They're not sharp enough to like cut you, but they are sharp enough to run you through. So don't mess up too bad. But you mess up with a bullwhip and there's not like this is a stage version versus a real version. Like that business hurts. I was not cut out for bullwhip, but I did, I dabbled. I know the basics. Yeah, but most of my stuff was teaching for choreography sake. So I'd come on to sets, go into shows, choreograph the fights for safety purposes, train the actors, train some kind of stagehand or stage manager to manage and handle the weapons safely. And then if I was on a stage set, it was, like I said, it was usually firearms. So same thing, just a different weapon. What's the most interesting book on my shelf right now? Okay, I have to clarify. Are you talking about the shelf behind me? Or are you talking about the shelf, like the big shelf in there? Because I got some interesting stuff. Let's see. Most interesting one on this shelf. Oh boy. The big shelf. Oh, the big shelf out there? The most interesting book on the big shelf out there. Okay, well, I don't know if it qualifies as the most interesting, so this may not answer your question, but I did, in fact, I'm learning to play mandolin. Actually, I'm learning to play mandolin, right? It's been really good for my mental health in quarantine to, like, be able to take a break. And, somebody bought me, mandolin for dummies. So on my, like, bookshelf full of, like, leather-bound classics, tabletop books, there's a few self-help books, lots of sci-fi, and like Stephen King is a mandolin for dummies. So if you're looking at my bookshelf, I would say that visibly is the most interesting book on my bookshelf right now. Yeah. Let's see, but I don't know, I've got a lot of really interesting books. that I actually haven't dived into yet. I have two RPGs on my shelf right now that I've not cracked open. First one is Vessin, which is like Nordic horror storytelling. It's really beautiful. So this is on my list to play. And then the other one I have, a lot of people have played. It's been out for a while. Is Outbreak Undead. That's another one I've had on my shelf that I've wanted to play for a really long time. But I can honorably say that I have cracked the spine on every Kobold Press book that has been ever sent to me. Yes, it is awesome. It's really, really awesome. I'd like to run like a Penny Dreadful style campaign using it because it's kind of perfect for that setting. And the art in it is phenomenal. It's so phenomenal. Lolf. Yeah, about my yeah, I got that. I thought it was an LOL joke because there's a Mandolin for Dummies book on my shelf. Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to think, what other books have I received? Sometimes, so I don't get to read as much as I used to like to read. I tend to actually, there was like a period of time in my life where I did a lot more reading on like professional books, like books I needed for the profession that I was in. So I did a lot of that kind of reading, or I would do a lot of academic reading where I was reading like papers from the National Endowment from the Arts, or like 40-page reports on a survey that was put out by some like national arts organization. So like I did not have the capacity for other reading. Now that is kind of past, now most of my time goes into RPG books, but I'm starting to pick back up some more reading. So people just give me books, which is funny because some of them I read and some of them I don't. I will say I have my brother has encouraged me to start the Warhammer book series, which I have the first one in my car, so that might be actually a read I take on the cruise. I'll read some Warhammer. Somebody's really suggested it to me. I was like, I might like that. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it a try. So I have the first Warhammer book in there. It's well worn because it's my brother's paperback, but whatever. I'd say, it hasn't been cracked open, but that would be lying. Yeah, it's always seemed interesting to me, too. I wonder if I like it because, I play a lot in a fantasy setting, but in terms of, like, what I like to actually read in GM, it is sci-fi, and so, like, I really love sci-fi. So, I don't know. I thought I'd give it a try. Maybe it's like some perfect in-between type world or whatever. What's the best thing I've ever added to a campaign? Oh, okay. The best. Okay, that's really hard. So I really love cheeky moments. And I hate to say it's like when I trick the players. That's not really it. But when the players are just really unsuspecting of something. So I'm just going to list a couple that I think up off the top of my head. Which really, this first one is not really a testament to me, but a testament to the monster design. There was a monster, actually, that's in this. I put it into the Warlock game I'm going to be playtesting on this boat. The Carnivorous Ship, which I think is one of the most brilliant mimics that has ever been designed ever. And I was running a pirate campaign, and they were looking for a ship with pirates on it that are all dressed in black. Now, this mimic ship called the Carnivorous Ship, it eats other ships. Like, that's what it consumes. But, of course, if anybody's on board, you're donezo. But it's meant to look like a regular ship, so it has these, like, shadowy figures, black figures, like, on board the top of the ship. And so when my crew pulled up, they thought it was their actual nemesis and didn't realize it was a carnivorous ship because they failed all of the rolls to identify it and pulled up right next to it. It was pretty awesome. And their response to realizing the point at which they realized it was a carnivorous ship and their answer and solution for it was pretty heroic. It was pretty great. So that was kind of cool. I really liked that. I've been playing in a long-term sci-fi campaign using the Coriolis system, which is designed by Free League, and I would say I've been like 40% running this extended printed campaign that they've put out. They've got 2 books of what I imagine will be a 3-part story. And so I started out trying to run it, and then of course my players ran away from it, and we kind of came back, and so I started just pulling the things I liked from it. That's really more how I GM anyways. But the core rulebook for Coriolis had something that the campaign did not ever bring up or talk about, which is Jinn. Kind of this Coriolis is like Arabian Nights in space is the best way to describe it, I think. And so it's got a lot of like cultural history, like inlaid into it. Excuse me. Yeah, and so I decided I wanted to add a Jinn, and that decision was made by one of the coolest things that I actually still use to this day, which is built into the system for Coriolis, which is a card system. Each person chooses an icon, and that icon, like the gods, they have a deck of cards, kind of like tarot. They're like 4 to 6 deep. And each one has something, a single word or representation on it, based on that icon. So sometimes it's a thing, a person, so forth and so on. And one of my players, they worship the Faceless, and he pulled the Jinn card, and I added a Jinn to the campaign, and it was one of the best things I think I ever did, for that campaign, for a variety of reasons. And I can't say it was like planned, and I'm like super proud of myself, but the way in which it's been integrated and the way in which it's shaped their story, the player's story, was I think one of the best like spices I ever added to a campaign. It's one of those things I'm like just most proud of. Because then I started doing a lot of research on actual Jinn and the history behind Jinn, because I wanted to tie it into this world, which is really like a future version in the third horizon where humans have migrated. So they carry some of this distant history with them. So anyways, it's been pretty cool. They're just now getting to the point, like every season the Jinn, because every time that Jinn card gets pulled again by that player for their icon deck, it comes back in some weird way. And Jinn are like, they have nothing to do with the story that these people are trying to like stop from happening, right? It's not actually part of their main storyline. It's just a cog in the larger story wheel. And because we have a mystic on board, there's like a lot of mystical things happening with the Jinn. And originally, like I said, I did a lot of research on Jinn, and one of the things I found out is Jinn are basically demons, and a lot of cultures believe that demons can't just appear. They have to ride something back across, right? They have to find a way across from the other side. So I love this idea. One of the major NPCs that they all loved very much died, and they resuscitated her, and a Jinn rode her soul back. And so they exorcised the Jinn from her body, and when they did, they instilled the right of a wish from the Jinn, because anytime you release a Jinn from a vessel. And so they're just now figuring this out a season later, that they had a wish that they could have asked of the Jinn, and instead they poked it back into a bottle. So there's like all of this stuff going around, and this mythos around this just Jinn problem really is what it is, because it has nothing to do with their main storyline, or so we think. So last week was like the big week, and maybe I say it's my favorite moment because it's just pinnacle right now in my mind. Yeah, they ripped the Jinn from the body of the person and put it back into another container, so they never got their wish. But I always liken it to like a Mises, right? Anybody like a Mr. Mises? They have to complete their task, and Jinn are tied to the wish. They have to complete the wish, regardless of how tricky it is, regardless of if they screw you over in the end. The wish has to be fulfilled for them to be free form, or for them to like move on. And so this angry Jinn has been stuffed into a bottle, unable to even ask if this person wants a question answered. So anyways, I very much look forward to see what they're going to do with it. But I think as a GM, for me, it's always the little things. My players tend to really connect with certain NPCs in ways I could never have expected, and like really like not want them to go, right? They want them to join the party, or they become attached to them in some way. And I think that's because I love characters, and as a GM I much rather communicate with my players and provide information in character than I would in any kind of like written paragraph form or general information. So it's always easier for me to play an NPC anyways. Great question. That was a very cool question. And it let me talk about my favorite campaign right now. Yeah, yeah, you can actually watch. I tested some of the campaign I wrote. It's changed a lot, but I did test at least the beginnings of it with the Marauders of the Middle Sea campaign, which was such an awesome table of like lady pirates. So cool. And you can actually see the moment and what they ended up doing with this carnivorous ship, which I thought was like brilliant on the player's part. Hi, welcome in Golden Glow. We do stream. Welcome to Kobold Press's Twitch channel. We do all kinds of things here. This week it's like a little weird on our Kobold Chats, which is our weekly talk show, because our guest was unable to make it at the last minute, and so now I'm kind of interviewing myself for Women Histories Month, but really the audience is interviewing me. So welcome in. I'm the Twitch producer here for Kobold Press, and yeah, we've got actual plays. In fact, we've got 2 running on Sundays right now. And you can see a lot of our written campaigns and all of our books in action. So, stick around. And if you feel like you need more of it, join us on the 20th for our 16th birthday. We're going to do 16 hours worth of Kobold streaming. Yeah, we're making an all right turn of today. Oh. Top 3 favorite non-standard but not homebrew playable characters. But not homebrew. Okay. Not standard. Well, okay, so I've really fallen in love with some of the Kobold Press builds. Mostly, actually, races. Okay, great. Oh, it is a race. So I have a deep love for the arena, which are the hedgehog folk of Midgard. They are just wonderful. They're wonderful. I love them. Play an arena. They're such a delight. Such a delightful little race. They've got a lot of really cool things, and I think there's actually a special rogue class build for them if you wanted to play like a really sneaky rogue. Pretty cool. Long before I knew there was one, I had always had a deep desire for like a mushroom race or a mushroom folk. Wizards eventually dropped one, and then I think Wizards dropped one, and then I know Kobold Press has a Mushroom Folk build as well, which is pretty cool because I always wanted one. Because Wizard was playtesting, they had put out the Circle of Spores Druid build at the time. This was, 4 years ago, before it became like standard play. And I was obsessed with it. I thought it was wonderful. 1, because it was a Druid, and 2, because it had to do with mushrooms, and I love mushrooms. But now there's all kinds of really cool things. And Kobold Press has a slew of wonderful spells for, like, mushroom builds. Like, if you want to go the noxious or, like, spore build, there's some really cool spells in Deep Magic. So, there are hedgehog races. They're called the Arena. Pretty cool. Yeah, me too. I just love my little myconids, my little mushroom people. I just think they're really wonderful. Let's see, what else? Midgard has a few really cool options. If you're a real fan of the Minotaur, there's some very cool builds, class builds for Minotaur in Midgard and Kobold Press. Really, I say Midgard, but you can use them on any table. Like, they have all these specialties for labyrinths, which is really, really neat. Great question. Oh, I almost spilled my coffee. I got so excited. Arena, thank you. Nailed it. I believe the Arena are... I think they're in the Midgard World Book. Don't hold me to that, but I actually believe they're a basic race in the Midgard Player's Guide, in the base one, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, Kobold Press is really famous for its Bearfolk. We have some really cool builds for Bearfolk, and a lot of really specialized items for Bearfolk. We actually can thank another lady of Kobold Press for that, which is Celeste Conowitch, who has put so much time and energy into creating just this massive collection of bear-themed stuff. The new Vault of Magic has a ton of honey and bear-themed magic items. And then you've got all of the many places throughout, like, Midgard where the Bearfolk kind of thrive, right? The Northlands they have a whole city in the Northlands whose protection are bees. True story. Whose protection are bees. And they have everything's made of honey. Honey mead, honey cakes, honey. It's so wonderful. So that's pretty cool. But I also think, I guess that's not really not standard. What else is not standard? If you like Ravenfolk, Kobold Press has a ton of awesome information about the Ravenfolk class builds as well, which are pretty swell. Actually, I believe that KP 11 Studios contributed to one of the Warlocks that expands on some like history or like lore around like race religions and things of the Ravenfolk, which is pretty cool. I think you can get that on the website. I think the PDF's available for that. And I think and obviously if you're a Patreon backer you would have received that. So but yeah, there's so many, y'all. I have such a love. I mean, again, Catfolk is not really crazy, but the builds for Catfolk out of the Southlands are just so cool. So cool. Non-standard, non-homebrew, yeah. But yeah, I have a deep love. I'll be honest, I've played an arena and now I'm actually playing a Darrow. I really love the Darrow as well. The Darrow are super cool. They are not Draugr, right? They're not dwarf. They're like corrupted gnomes. They're corrupted gnomes, and their entire life is about corruption from the point of like adolescence up. And so they are often insane, and their rites and rituals for coming of age require their parents to drive them mad. And so their culture is embedded in this idea of losing your minds. And so the Darrow believe that if they are scouring crazy scourge of the earth, that the gods and the bigger beings will ignore them, because they believe that the world is basically ending at all times. And so Darrow have some really cool builds where it's like, do you go the mind crazy? Were you able to sustain? Like, I think there's a build where you aren't quite as affected and are a little bit more normalized for society. You can grow like the madness or the insanity that they drive upon you can manifest physically. So like tentacles or like extra growths. Their Darrow are really, really cool, and they're a super ton of fun to use if you're using void magic to go with them. I'm playing a Darrow right now that's obsessed with like eldritch magics and the void, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun. They're really kooky and nuts. So yeah, hard love for my tiny class or races. I really like my arena and my little Darrow. I like that a lot. Good question. Another great question. Always a fan of those mushrooms. Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah, so like typical childhood. Exactly. Just a little farther. And like they do crazy things. Like, so for example, my Darrow, I wrote their story is that their parents as a child fed them to a goat, and in the belly of this goat they saw the void and crawled from the gullet of this beast, who eventually became their like best friend, having seen and known of the void, and their life of madness has been drawn to finding the void. It's true. It's very true. Yes, tiny races have such epic challenges compared to medium-sized. Size matters in D&D. The struggle is real. It's true. It's so very true. But as you can tell, I play a lot of games. I've played a lot of games. I can say I've had that great honor to play a lot of games with a lot of really cool people. And some of them, praise be, designed by women. There's a couple that I can just like. There are two actually I can shout out at the top of my head. Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is really, really good. Really great. Uses Powered by the Apocalypse system, and was a heavily funded Kickstarted one. Really, really love that. The other game that I really love, as I've gotten more and more time gaming with people, and as I've been more and more of the forever GM, sometimes it's nice to play games that are GM-less. Have no GMs. that's really nice sometimes, where you and your friends can just sit down and game. And so, in fact, there's a great GM-less game that I love called For the Queen. It's a card-based RPG game that you can just like break out and play. The game's designed by women, and all the art in it of the queens, there's like a deck of queen cards that have queen's art on them, are all done by women. All the various art, they're just really beautiful. Do I have my deck? Or is that my tarot? I think that's my tarot. I don't know where my For the Queen deck is, but I have one somewhere. When you move, you can't find anything, y'all. I've been here like over 6 months, and I still can't find anything ever. So just the way of the world, I guess. Oh, and hey, everybody, remember to stick around. 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. We're back today with more mini painting. And look, I'll give you a little sneak preview. Speaking of Bearfolk, guess what I've got? Little Bearfolk mini action. Got another one here. I've got a guest today gonna be joining me. It's gonna be pretty swell, pretty sweet, pretty awesome. The painting pirate is coming on, and we're gonna be painting some Bearfolk. So stick around. You won't want to go anywhere. Don't miss that, because it's gonna be great. I'm very excited. I'm finding that mini painting is actually really cathartic. Everybody, mini painting. For many years, I was an artist. I did all kinds of art. I've painted on canvas. I've made art installation pieces for all of the burns I've gone to. I've done all kinds of art. Right? You go to art school, you just have to make art. So I've done a lot of that. But mini painting, I only got into very, very briefly when I first moved to Atlanta, and I did a couple. I painted my very first character ever, which was a dwarf, yeah. It just kind of dwindled off, and then the more I played online, the less I needed minis. But I think I've really come to enjoy my little, like, once every 3 week painting sesh. Forever GM here, always looking for interesting far realm Lovecraftian inspired content. Has Kobold Press published anything along those lines? Do you have any interest in those sort of things? Any recommendations for 5e published content? Great question. So, as Dot, I have a very interesting relationship with Lovecraftian horror, or like playing in Cthulhu settings, as a lot of people say. But that aside, the closest thing that I could tell you that you could use that's current published that I can think of, and if we've got other kobolds in chat that have any suggestions, by all means, I would suggest grabbing the Midgard World Book and looking at the Red Wastes. Now, the Red Wastes themselves are not very Lovecraftian in terms of, like, aesthetic. It's just what it sounds like. It's like wasteland. But there's a lot of, like, elder and older magic, like crazy, strange things that happen in the Red Waste that, like, crawl up from the depths of the earth and things like that could be used in a Lovecraftian kind of way if you want that, like, psychological horror. I would also say that if you looked at the Ruthenian Plane, this is the plane that's also available in the same book, the Midgard World Book. There's some interesting stuff there. The Ruthenian Plane. There's an interesting, that's the realm in which Baba Yaga walks. Don't say her name out loud. That's the realm that her hut walks. But everything in the plane is it travels. Nothing is stagnant or stands still. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that can be found in the Ruthenian Plane as well that could be kind of strange and just edgy enough for that, like, Lovecraftian horror. But I will tell you, I have other suggestions. 5e is hard. Like I said, I don't play a lot of it, so I play a lot of 5e. I don't play a lot of Lovecraft. One of the reasons I don't is because I, as a player, don't tend to like to like play out the, like, oh, I'm losing my mind and I know where this is going. Like, once the elder god rises, that's it. The story is about the like slow decline, whether it's you or your party or the world. But I do have one Cthulhu game that I really, really love, because it takes that and turns it on its head just a little bit, just enough where I find it to be interesting and forces everybody to get out of this like, oh, I'm losing my mind, because that's already happened. Too late. Fate put out a game called Fate of Cthulhu, and it's kind of like Terminator. In that the world has already fallen to a god. They have all of the many like Lovecraftian gods in there. You pick the king in yellow. You pick the king in yellow, and they'll have it kind of all set up. And there are a series of events that happen throughout history that allowed the king in yellow to rise, and for the complete decline and fall of civilization. The game starts with basically the resistance of humanity hiding out, and they have been able to reverse alter the eldritch magics to create a time machine. And you basically send the gameplay as players is your agents being sent back in time to try to stop the 4 major events from happening. You can't really stop the elder god, but you can basically stop the decline or fall of humanity. Yes, starting after the world has fallen. It's a very, very cool Cthulhu idea, because they're also going back in time and they're fighting. This is what I think is so brilliant about this game. There are 2 gameplay aspects to it that I think are really neat. One, you're going back in time. They're trying to stop these events from happening, but the moment that they go back in time with the knowledge of this elder, whatever it is, or the king in yellow, the timeline starts earlier. Because that's the idea, right? The knowledge of it being there, it makes it manifest. So everything kind of shifts the timeline a little bit. And so there is the other gameplay thing I love is you as the GM are trying to fight them as the elder god. And so there's like a track, and everything that they do that's successful in like stopping the original things from happening, they get a tick. But those things can have consequences, and if they don't, or something else alters, the elder god gets one. And then at the end of the campaign, after you're done running it, when you've tried to stop everything from happening, it's a narrative cash-in where we go back and forth, and you all get to say what you did to help save humanity, and I get to narrate what happened based on how many tickets I have in exchange for that, in terms of what the elder god did. So it's a choice Cthulhu game. You should check it out. You have questions as a 2E and 5E GM. The 5E brand companion at one of the Kobold Press translations. We have Tome of Beasts and Midgard World Book and Margrave. But which books would you personally say we definitely need to translate from the Kobold Press range next? Good question. Okay, so we've got Tome of Beasts and the Midgard World Book and Margrave. Well, we've only got one of our what I call our reference books there, which is our monster book. But now we have Vault of Magic, which is a bunch of magic items. But I would say if we're looking for playability in other languages, I would convert Deep Magic, because that is like 900 spells available in other languages. I would say it should be Deep Magic. Yeah, I would vote Deep Magic for sure. And if it wasn't Deep Magic, then maybe a series of the Kobold Press guides, like World Building 101, Kobold Press Guide to Monsters. Those are super duper helpful, and that would be yeah. But my gut instinct says Deep Magic is like the next logical thing to add to that list. But maybe that's just because I use it a lot. Man, y'all, these are great questions. Yeah, Vault as a hardcover and Deep Magic as a PDF. I think I have my Deep Magic as a pocket edition, but because I use it so much. But I'm actually very excited. You know, like I said, I haven't been playing with people in person a lot, but for the cruise, y'all don't tell my players. Nobody tell my players. For the cruise, I'm surprising them. I'm going to be taking... Oh, no. Everything's going to shift. I'm taking my Deep Magic card set. This big box back here, down here at the bottom, are all of Deep Magic, but they're in cards based on class. So they're going to have, like, magic cards while we're on the boat. It'll be cool. You like the prepared adventures. Are there more in the works? I can only imagine that there probably is at some point. I can't spill all the beans of things happening behind the scenes because they know I spill beans, so they don't tell me everything until I can actually know it. But I can tell you that yes, they will probably do some more, and we're actually running the Prepared series here on Kobold Press. We did our first run of 2 of them from the original Prepared, not Prepared 2. But trust me, I've been harping on them. I would love, love, love more Prepared series. They're so handy, super duper helpful, and all I can say is keep your ear to the ground and look for some new content coming in the summer. Can't say more than that. Can't say more than that. Oh, my beans. So many beans in this bag, and I can't spill them all. Favorite glass ceiling story. Okay, favorite glass ceiling story. All right, you know what? I'm going to tell you one. You know, y'all, like, I got stories out the butt about glass ceiling stuff, about the horrible places that I've worked, about, you know, workplace misogyny and those kinds of things. And as a woman, you learn to find your own value and find the places where you're respected to work. But one time, actually, I think I started talking about this last week, but I didn't go into detail. So I'm going to make this my favorite glass ceiling story. Welcome in, 12-sided guy. Okay. So many years ago, when I was still doing a lot of visual art, I had a friend reach out to me for Women's History Month. They were doing a gallery at this very hoity-toity private school here in Atlanta. This private arts high school had their own public gallery, like arts gallery, and they wanted to have some professional female artists from the Atlanta area put some work in this piece. It had been a long time since I had painted anything. I was like super duper not prepared. I was like, but I accepted because I really wanted to, and so I'm like trying to figure this out. And I wanted to do a piece on the glass ceiling. And I wanted to figure out exactly like how to do that. And I pondered for a while. And during this time of my great ponder while I stared at a white canvas, I learned that makeup expires, and oftentimes a lot sooner than you think. Usually lipstick will expire before the woman gets through the tube. All the way down to the bottom. So I got inspired by this idea of, I just sat and pondered all the many tubes of lipstick that have been bought for jobs, for interviews, for dates, for all the many places where women hit the glass ceiling and never finished, right? Those tubes of lipstick that would represent the trials that all women go through in their lives, and they're never finished before they expire. So I did this giant shout out online for people to mail me. Oh, this is way before COVID. For people to mail me their used, unfinished lipstick tubes. And I ended up with about 200 unused lipstick tubes. Couldn't use lip gloss for the project that I wanted. And so originally I was inspired by this idea of actually doing a painting using lipstick. And then when it got here, I undid all the lids and twirled them out and like set them like dominoes in like this gridded pattern on my counter just because I wanted to see them. And I was so moved by the colors, by the variety, by the choices, by the textures of these lipsticks, because they each represented a woman who had made the choice to wear that color, that shade, that thing for whatever it was they were attempting to overcome when it came to the glass ceiling. So I went to Home Depot and I bought a piece of glass. Actually, it was wider than that. It was about yeah, it was right, about 3.5 feet by like about 2, maybe 2 foot wide. And I got a matching piece of board cut so that they were the same size. I sprayed the board black and I went home and I literally replicated what I had done on the counter that I was so moved by. And I mounted each of these lipsticks like side by side by side, row by row by row, and filled this giant board with all the lipsticks and twirled them up. And then I heated them with a blow dryer and I dropped the glass on the lipstick and let it just sink down. And let all of this lipstick like hit the glass ceiling and spread and smear and become this kind of art piece from underneath the glass. And then I mounted the whole thing down, and when you set it upright, it it looked like you were looking at a painting, but it wasn't. It was the lipstick that had been smashed against the glass ceiling of all of these women. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I sprayed the whole thing so it kind of stayed solid. Yeah, and then you could basically, because it was all mounted that board, I flipped it upright and you hung it on the wall, kind of staring at it. But when you lean to the side, you could see all the tubes. Oh, no, no, no. It was like when it's squished, I didn't like mix it, right? Like I just twirled them up, heated them, and just let the glass go, and it just squished them. Welcome in, Roll for Spoons. So glad to have you all here. Thank you for the raid. We are celebrating Women's History Month, and today we're doing it by interviewing me, which is, seems so silly when I say it out loud, but we're really glad to have you all here. So yeah, anyways, I got pictures of that somewhere. But yeah, it didn't turn into it was actually rather beautiful. It was like lots of shades, lots of colors. They kind of made these like, they would spread out, you know, into these like little dots, and then it would be a dot next to a dot next to a dot, and they would just like merge and kind of touch, and it was actually rather beautiful, and I got a lot of compliments on it. So I'm going to say, instead of diving into all of the horrible things that I've faced in the actual face of the glass ceiling, that's my favorite glass ceiling story, was the one time I wanted to do a piece of art about the glass ceiling. Yeah, I don't even have that piece anymore. That piece is long gone. It was huge, and definitely not something that was meant to like most people would want on their wall. But I might have pictures. I'll have to see if I can find pictures for y'all next time. Maybe I'll wrangle them up and post them on social media so y'all can see them after this stream. Which we are rounding out, everybody, because in 30 minutes time we are back here with more mini painting. Speaking of painting, speaking of art, come on, hang out for 2 hours. We're going to put on some lo-fi jams. I'm welcoming in our guest, the Painting Pirate, whose stream I have actually followed. I think they're delightful. I think you're going to think they're delightful, and I'm ready to hang out for, a couple hours and paint some, if my poor eyes can hold out, paint some bears. So we're going to paint some Bearfolk. He's going to paint one, and I'm going to paint one. We'll see which one we're both inspired by. But I want to thank you all. I'll do a last call for a question in case anybody's got like a burning desire. You should get an ointment for that. Or you could just ask the question. I'll try to answer it for you. Maybe that's all the ointment you need. And if nothing else, we will see you back here next week. Same Kobold time, same Kobold channel. I will be rolling dice on a cruise. I'm so sorry to say, but for all of you, you can tune in next week and you're going to catch all 3 hours, so the 3 panels that we did live at PAX U 2021. We've got incredible lineups, incredible people on those panels, and just information out that you can't even possibly imagine. So, but yes, thank you, everybody. I've actually got to go finish prepping those games. But when I get back, I'll tell you all about them. I'll tell you how they went, and we can get you filled in, and hopefully, if my playtest goes well, you'll be able to get your grubby paws on that same module. It'll be pretty sweet. All right, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday. We'll see you back here in half an hour for happy little kobolds while we paint some minis and make happy accidents. That is all. Same Kobold time, same Kobold channel next week. Bye, everybody.